One thing that is clear is that democracies around the world are having trouble getting deficit spending under control.
There was something you said on stage that caught my attention. You said that Bitcoin could become the world's reserve currency because of the US debt situation, which is ballooning. How realistic is that?
Well,
US debt is about to blow up. Global debt is about to blow up. Buying Bitcoin will be one of the only ways to survive all of this and wind up on top. You need to get 0.1 Bitcoin, at least according to Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong, who just revealed at the Coinbase State of Crypto Summit that he doesn't see this lasting that much longer. Hit the like button immediately. Share this video everywhere you can. Most regular people aren't thinking about all of this. You're lucky if you're seeing this video. Brian Armstrong explains his exact thesis on global debt and why you should buy Bitcoin here. Listen.
There was something you said on stage that caught my attention. You said that Bitcoin could become the world's reserve currency because of the US debt situation, which is ballooning. How realistic is that?
Well, it really is unclear at this point, but one thing that is clear is that democracies around the world are having trouble getting deficit spending under control. And that can only, if you study history, right, the changing world order, different empires, like who had the reserve currency at different moments in time, once you decouple currency from hard commodities, the inevitable story is they get overprinted and extend, right? And so I think right now, to be clear, I want the US to remain the reserve currency status. I think a strong America is very important for the world, and I think cryptocurrency is helping the dollar enormously with things like USDC and stablecoins. But if the debt situation doesn't get fixed, I do think that eventually Bitcoin will have to become the reserve currency for better or worse. It's not going to be the Chinese RMB because I think they have their own debt problems, and it's not a coincidence that as we're seeing all-time highs in US debt, we're seeing all-time highs in Bitcoin.
Make no mistake about it, this will be the next big catalyst that sends Bitcoin's price to the high 100 range. Brian Armstrong explains.
I was reading some research on crypto from the JP Morgan team, and they said the retail investor is looking for the next catalyst in Bitcoin. I mean, it made sense. It's been a pretty big year. We've had the Bitcoin Reserve. We have companies like yours putting out new products. But is the next catalyst for retail investors that rising debt that you're talking about? As this continues to go up, why wouldn't you want to own Bitcoin?
Yeah, I do think the average person in America, even if they don't quite understand, interest rates and the yield curve, they understand that their money is worth less than it was 5 years ago. And they feel that something is inherently untrustworthy or broken about that. And so I do think they are looking for alternatives, and Bitcoin is probably the best answer, and that's why we're seeing all-time highs in Bitcoin prices.
And let's get a second opinion. This is the Chief Investment Officer at Swan Bitcoin. He studies markets, including Bitcoin and crypto markets, to get answers to questions exactly like this. We know what it took to get Bitcoin from here to here. Institutions, corporate adoption, US becoming crypto-friendly, etc., etc. What's it going to take to get Bitcoin from here to the high 100s, to the mid 200s? Listen to what Swan's Chief Investment Officer says here, and then we'll compare it to Brian Armstrong.
It's been a slower than usual rally for Bitcoin, sparked by institutional ownership of the cryptocurrency and corporate adoption of it, as we just discussed. In fact, according to Bitcoin treasuries, the number of Bitcoin held by public companies has grown more than 30%. So what do you think it will take to keep that momentum going? Is it more companies putting Bitcoin on their corporate balance sheets? Is it more positive headlines tied to trade tensions? Is it a mix of the two? What's at play there?
I think it's a mix of a lot of those factors. I mean, corporations continuing to adopt makes it more easy for the rest of the corporations to follow suit. A lot of them need a playbook that's already been proven out in the market, so they understand how to do all the things with Bitcoin. So custody, for example, is a big issue that a lot of corporations, a lot of people in the boardroom really have to juggle with as they're evaluating Bitcoin as a core asset to themselves. But as that becomes more clear to them, they'll quickly be able to get comfortable with Bitcoin as an asset and continue that adoption trend. But I think we're going to see it through countries and other government organizations as well. You saw the announcement with New York promoting Bitbonds, and I think that's a massive step because when someone goes first, it creates the playbook for the rest of these cities and states to follow, and Bitbonds are going to be a very powerful tool to drive adoption as well. So you're going to see a confluence of factors that bring Bitcoin to the mainstream and make it a really easy yes for companies and executives to take on.
So are you optimistic that Bitcoin will surpass that new all-time high just under $112,000? Fundstrat's Tom Lee, he joined CNBC a couple of months ago, and he said that he thinks Bitcoin could hit $150,000 this year. Do you think that's feasible? What's your prediction?
I do. Yeah, I think it's going to get into the high 100s for sure. I would not be surprised to see it in the 225 to 250 range at some point. What you're starting to see is this really large structural bid coming in underneath it. And a lot of these corporations that are buying it, they're long-only buyers. They're not traders of Bitcoin. So they're using it truly as an asset to capitalize on the balance sheet. And when they do that, they're not intending to sell it. So you're seeing all this capital flowing into the markets and into these companies, and that's taking Bitcoin off the market. So when that float starts to shrink, but that buying pressure continues to increase, you can see some really explosive things happen in the price of Bitcoin, and that comes back to that inelastic supply to demand. Doesn't matter how much demand there is, there's no more Bitcoin coming to the market for them to buy.
But all this just keeps getting bigger. What's going to be the tipping point that causes all of this to just unravel? Actually, think about it. This just keeps going up. What's the tipping point? Brian Armstrong explains.
What's the tipping point for that to happen? When debt hits a certain level, suddenly we have to worry about the world reserves currency being the US dollar?
Yeah, I mean, there's not usually, it's like one of these things like the frog is slowly cooked. And, I think if you look at other countries in the past, it was maybe around 150% or 200% debt to GDP. Things started to get a little wonky. And so we're going to have to see what happens. I hope that the Congress, which is doing an amazing job, by the way, and on passing legislation in a bipartisan way for crypto. And this administration, the Trump administration, has been an incredible tailwind for crypto. They've done an incredible job. So, I think there's a lot to be grateful for, but I hope that, the U.S. government can get the spending under control to preserve this American experiment.
The future is bullish for Bitcoin and crypto. This is a dip worth buying, in my opinion, even if it goes a little bit lower. And Brian Armstrong here gets so excited, not even talking about price, just the fundamental future of this space and what he sees changing going forward. Subscribe to Altcoin Daily for daily videos keeping you informed. See you tomorrow, my friends. Check out this clip.
What would a Bitcoin reserve currency mean to a company like Coinbase?
Well, it would certainly mean increased adoption of Bitcoin, right? I think that our goal is to power more and more of people's financial lives with Coinbase products. And we started it in trading. Now we're moving into all kinds of financial services like payments and borrowing and lending. And eventually, I think crypto and Coinbase can be a replacement for people's bank account, right? I think that more and more of their financial life will happen on-chain with Coinbase, and it'll bring new benefits and services to customers. Like, why shouldn't you earn 4.5% on your checking account, right? Or why can't you send money instantly anywhere in the world for free? Or, why can't you if you live in Turkey or Nigeria, why can't you trade U.S. equities 24/7 with perpetual futures, right? So
Seems logical, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's artificial barriers and middlemen taking fees, and that's what crypto is all about. It's about updating the financial system, bringing freedom and individual sovereignty to people all over the world.